This next session is about editing, and our guest this afternoon is David Banbury. So I'd like to welcome David to the stage. Please make him feel welcome.
I'm just going to ramble some philosophies about editing, my thoughts in general, and field questions from you guys. A lot of today has been talking about pathways for students into their careers. One thing about editors, properly sound editors as much as picture editors, is we tend to work in little cubby holes in isolation, and we hardly see each other, let alone the wider community. So apart from my own pathway, I don't really have too much advice that hasn't been already given quite brilliantly by some of the earlier people that have spoken today. It's very much with editing, it's as you've probably gleaned from a lot of the people that have already spoken, it's about the networks you make, it's about the people you make, it's about the producers and directors you end up working with, because filmmaking is such a collaborative medium, and it's the people you work with that are going to get you work. And it will start off very much volunteer work, working on your own productions and just doing stuff. A bit like Ashley said, you work those muscles by making stuff, and the more you make, the better you get, and the more you give each other feedback. Probably cartoons and animation is one of the few places where you can do everything yourself. And I used to work when I was a student with someone, and he very much was a director and a filmmaker who wanted total control over everything. So he didn't really last long as a filmmaker. He was a great musician, and he ended up being a great doctor, but he wasn't a very good filmmaker because he didn't have that ability to work with other people and to collaborate. So the more that you can get your students aware that it's the partnerships and the supporting roles that they have with each other that makes a film. Because sometimes it's the input from an left field that can often change what you're working on. It's not always necessarily locked to the script or to the ideas that you have if you're making a documentary. I'm an editor. I tend to work mainly in documentary. That's because there are a lot more documentaries than feature films around. So my career has mainly been long format. I tend not to ever do short format and advertising. So I'm mainly a documentary, TV series, TV dramas, and the occasional either long format documentary or feature film. I'm going to show you a few clips. The ones I've chosen I think are particularly relevant to the nature of filmmaking. So I've tended to leave the drama material out because a lot of the documentaries that I've worked on have quite often involved the process of filmmaking, and I'll chat a bit to you about that as the course goes on. One thing as teachers is that you're also probably very concerned about how do I teach editing programs. Dale said instantly Avid's the one to go for. There are basically four main programs that people are using these days, starting at the more consumer end. Final Cut Pro X is a very powerful program that anyone on Mac will have fairly easy access to. You have to pay for it, but it's not very expensive. It's something that when people learn as the very first thing they first edit on, they just become very good at it and very intuitive at it. Having come from a traditional editing base, I have tried many a time to work with it, and sometimes have forced myself to work on a project. First time I worked on it, and it was only a 3-minute project. I ended up exporting the entire project to another program because I could not work the way it worked. It tends to work on a storyline base, and then you add pictures on top, very much like a newsreel style. You go out, you shoot your base interview, and you cover it up with pictures. And if you move that base, all the pictures go with it. And I'm used to much more of everything's movable, and so it's a mindset that I had a lot of trouble adapting to. I eventually was okay with it, but it's a hard program to work, and some people become passionate advocates of it because they fall in love with it. The next program that most people are probably familiar with is the Adobe products. They come with the advantage of all interrelating quite well. They have dynamic links, so you can work in Photoshop, flick something over to Premiere Pro, send the sound out to Audition, and they work fairly well together. It comes with the Adobe licensing that you have to pay your eternal monthly fees to, which I find very annoying. I like the idea of, I bought Photoshop and you bought it and you paid for it and you had it, and having to pay for it every month is a bit annoying. It's also a program that tries to keep a foot in the consumer field and a foot in the professional field, so it can be an uneasy fit in the professional field. And as projects become bigger, you probably find it will fall over quite a lot. I find it a program I have to use quite a lot, but I find it a little bit clunky and a little bit frustrating, because it does tend to not work with me as easily as some of the other programs. Dale mentioned Avid. Avid has a very long history, and it is an incredibly robust program that is really, really good at media management. I recently worked on a TV series, and we used Avid purely and solely because of the way it works with audio. In TV recording, the sound recorders will often record a guide track on track one, and he might have 2 or 3 lapel mics, he might have a boom, and he might have a couple. You might get a sound file that's got 8 files in it. The advantage of Avid is you can link to the top level, just use that and cut with that, and when you send it to sound, when they open up, all the 8 files come back in. Whereas in most of the other editing applications, if you're editing, you've got blocks of 8 tracks that you have to constantly carry around every time you do a cut, and it becomes cumbersome. So the ease of Avid allowing you to just work with one bit of sound for each picture and having that all get unpacked later on meant it's a lot easier to work with. But Avid, again, is also a little bit clunky. Every program's got its pros and cons, and it also comes with a price. The program that I'm going to be using here today is Davinci Resolve. Davinci Resolve it started off predominantly as a grading program. It became a very good program for conforming and for translating rushes from one format to another. So you might shoot in one format, make rushes to cut from, and then go back later on. And I used it for a couple of years on features and on documentaries without ever using it as a grading tool. A few years ago, they started trying to be a one-stop shop. So they incorporated an editing program into the program, Resolve, and now they've added in an audio program, Fairlight. And all the programs are within the same program, but they have pages that you flip between. One really nice thing about the program is that it allows you to turn off those pages if you don't want them. So if I'm working with a director and he needs to work on rushes, I can turn off the grading, the audio, the special effects. It's also got Fusion, a special effects program. I've opened it, looked at it and gone, I don't understand it, and closed it. But I never look at it, I just turn that panel off. And I can give the director a simple timeline that he can look at rushes, she can look at rushes, and they can report back without having to go into the program where you edit. And you can just turn everything else off. So in terms of having a low entry where you don't need to know much, it's really good because a lot of the complexities can be hidden, and then you can unfold and unpack those as you get more experienced. And I like to play with a bit of grading, and there's lots of learning tools around there. It has the great advantage in terms of a teaching tool in that it's free. So it has a version where you pay and you get noise reduction and things that are bigger than UHD, which is a very big frame. When you consider that most cinemas in the world use 2K projection, and we're now shooting on our phones in 4K, pretty much everything you need to do is available within the free version of the program. So that's my quick wrap-up of what software programs are about in editing. And this is Resolve. So you can see down the bottom, it's got various different panels. This is where you bring your media in, and all your files go up in this section here, and you bring them into here and edit with. This is a program called a cut page. It's a little bit emulating Final Cut Pro X's timeline. It's got a timeline of your whole project that's always there, and then it's got individual shots down the bottom, which is not a page I've used very often. It's designed for putting things together very fast and working very quickly, and everything that's available at this page, and one very clever thing with Resolve, everything's available on one page is available on all the others. This is the main edit page. So as you can see, the timelines are more detailed, and you can zoom in as required. And then you've got your normal edit panels up here, and fairly normal looking edit device. Then we can come over to Fusion, which is a special effects thing. And it can be very handy, but it's something that it's a super deep learning curve to go in there. Then you have the grading tool. Yep, that's the grading one. Then you have a much more sophisticated audio tool, the Fairlight, and then they have their delivery page, which you can reformat and deliver in many different ways. So you can be working in high def and then deliver an MPEG-4 very easily out of this. It's also really great, which is why so many people used it for so long as a delivery tool for rushes, because you could bring your rushes in, reformat it, squirt them out, and use them. I've put up here on the big screen. This is one of my favourite ways of editing. The bigger the format you get, the more you're going to go back to basics. And I don't think editing is about the technology we use. Editing is about, this is the director, Chris Horton, and this is us working on this film. It's about how you put the scenes together, how you tell the truth of the story, how you construct and reframe everything. And seriously, whiteboard and a blackboard or cards on a wall. And that's going to save you in terms of story making, because instead of being distracted by the imagery you've created and the sound you've created, you're going to go back to, well, what's this scene about? If you can summarise it on a 3x5 card and stick it on a wall, you can then go, right, well, how does that relate to this scene? And you can build up your stories and restructure them very simply and quickly without having to do it in the complications and the intricacies of editing on a system. I can't say enough about how many large format films have been saved by the paper cut. And students will, if you can get them into the discipline of writing scripts, writing story outlines and following those, because when you get into the nitty-gritty of scenes that you've shot, and even in documentary, often you'll find documentaries, I've worked on documentaries that were scripted from woe to go. And we've had the screenwriter sitting in the room with us, and the script might be, we go and interview this person about that, and you discover in the shooting what the scene's about, but it's still been plotted and scripted that that's going to be that part of the story. And of course, it's always good to have that paper, to have that idea frame to go back to, because you can get lost in an edit and you can get lost in the intricacies of it because there's so many things happening. But if you can go back to the paper edit or to the script or to what you originally intended, you can go, right, this is what we intended. Are we still on track? Is that where we want to go, or do we want to go somewhere else? And it gives you a bedrock that you can work with that may not be as glitzy as moving pictures around and changing sounds, but it gives you, I guess, a foundation upon which to base your actual film upon, because it is so easy to get lost in a film. Of course, once you do that, then you can have the luxury of going, right, we've got the whole film together, something's not working, and you can look at it on the board and you can go, right, scene 5, that's a really good scene. Let's move that to scene 1, and you can restructure it, and then you can go and follow that restructuring on the on the board. I'm going to show you the start of a documentary that I made with a director I've worked with quite a lot, Shalom Armand. We met years ago when she was struggling with a film, and I came on board, and we've worked virtually everything she does, we've worked together. We almost don't talk anymore. We've built up such a communication and such a similar way of working that she'll just be sitting in the back of the room, we'll talk about the scene, and I'll just start cutting. And I just know what she wants, she knows I know what she wants, and we just work together really well. And every now and then, I'll just be about to hit delete on a shot, and I'll hear a voice go, "Oh, I really like that shot." And I go, "Oh, all right, we'll try and make it fit into the film." And you invariably can. There's not very often a shot you have to totally throw away. One thing I wanted to give you a couple of things today also, that we had a session last night with some editors and with some sound editors called All About Audio, and we just talked about things in the industry that we do and things that we don't do and things that we should do and things that we can do. And I thought, I've been working in this industry for 30 years, and one of the sound editors said something, and I went, I didn't know that. And I'm always telling students that I'll often come and work with students, and they'll have their first shot of their film sitting on screen, and then we'll start, they'll chat and we'll talk, and then they'll hit play, and I'll tell them, "Can you stop?" And they'll stop, and I'll say, "I'm really bored with that shot." And they go, "What do you mean? I've only just started the film. The shot's been on screen for 2 minutes. I'm already bored." The students don't have that idea of presentation, and we need to, even if you're just showing someone something, every time you show someone something, it's a presentation. So I've always said to anyone making, and so many people don't do this anymore. They start the film on the first frame of the film on there, put some black in the front, put a countdown, and put a 2-pip on there. So when you go out of sync, you can find it. And this sound editor the other night said, it was really helpful if your countdown has a clock on it, because just having numbers go pop, pop, pop doesn't really help us. But if we can see the countdown come around, we can get ready and go, and we can know that it's in sync or not. It's a much easier tool. So I thought I'd leave the ID board in here so you actually get to see a really simple and effective time countdown.
Chọn bênนี้này. Bênนี้ạ.
Cái đang từ lơ cái bàm này, cái bàm này chu này. Cái từ ở u phụ à.
เดี๋ยวให้ดูกระจกเลยยังไม่เสร็จเซ็กอะชอบไหมลูกชอบไหมไม่ได้ใส่ตลอดเหรอ
She say I don't want.
ถึงเขาใส่หุ่นเขายังไม่ร้องไห้เลยกูใส่กูร้องไห้
Ngồi tệ bà ở lý tế rế sang dù. Nó ở mẹ sát ta nó là cái nó là bà duy chứ đã. Cái này khi được dù mà thằng quỷ cái răng là quỷ. Khi được dù bia bà ngô bút ra cái răng kia xa. Take this song, last song, no take.
This one you think's gonna be better?
I think.
Okay.
But still, but to listen, yeah?
Yeah.
Good, no good.
It's gonna be better.
You made me funny.
We became friends, and she wanted to play with my camera. And before I knew it, I became the curiosity.
Interview you, okay?
Oh, film me?
Yeah.
Okay. Standing?
Yes,
Standing up?
Okay. ทำนิดๆหน่อย มีคนไล่ ทำนิดๆหน่อย
Do you want me to sit down or standing?
It's okay. I think I do this. Okay, now. Please talk to me, Shalom. First time you come here, how do you feel?
First time I came here, I felt quite shy because I know that lots of tourists come here and take photos. So I didn't take any photos. But then I started talking to you, Marja. So that was really good because I got to understand more about your traditions and your culture. So it was really good.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
And this is another film that I made quite recently with an Aboriginal filmmaker who thought he was making a film about his mother looking for her father who was lost in time. They didn't really know anything about his grandfather. As he was planning to make the film, and this happens quite more often than you would think, the filmmaker, and classic example is what you just saw with Shalom, the filmmaker can become the subject of the film. So Eduardo was told, well, you're the subject of the film as much as your mother. It's not really a film about your mother, it's a film about you. So he ended up having to co-direct with the cinematographer and ended up being in the film, which had its own problems. I remember seeing some footage of, he ended up with a film with many chiefs because the producer was also a filmmaker. So he was interviewing somebody and he was bringing cups, Eduardo was bringing cups of tea to everyone at the table. And I said, I'm looking at the footage, I said, Eduardo, why are you bringing the cup of tea? And they said, well, they told me to. I'm there, but Eduardo, it's not your house. This is really weird footage. I can't put that in the film. It's one of the few cases where I've got footage I can't use because everyone will go, even if they're not registering it, they'll be going in the back of their brain, that's really odd. He's making tea in this guy's house that he's never met before. So there can be a problem with too many chiefs. And in this case, he wanted to make the film partially, but having been convinced it was in the film, he wanted to make the film also about his songwriting, and he wanted to start the film with his music. He was convinced by the team of other people working on the film, no, let's just go straight into the story about your grandfather. And as we work together, because a director-editor relationship becomes a really close bond, I realised that not only was the film not really working very well, but it had gone astray from back to the script, back to what his original intent was. You look at his original intent was to start with a song. So we went back to that. I said, Eduardo, we've got to do a cut where we start with your song. And that's what we've got now. That's what the film ended up being.
We were running.
This is my grandfather, Joe Murray.
For glory.
I know very little about him. Just that he was a musician, travelling entertainer and boxer.
From a midnight story.
He left no traces of where he came from.
We were running.
He never spoke about his past to his wife, his children, or even his grandchildren.
And we were running. And we were falling.
Mum told me that in the boxing ring, Grandpa was known as the Black Panther.
There was no place for us, but angels must be dancing on the Milky Way.
I've been writing songs about Grandpa and jamming with my niece Sarah.
On the Milky Way.
It feels like he is speaking to us through our artistic connection.
Forever.
In my 20s and 30s, I lived in the United States, playing in a band with my brother, going from place to place, often crashing on someone's couch. I ended up living in Los Angeles, working for an organisation that helped out homeless children. All these kids had one thing in common, a loss of connection from their family, their own history, their home. That got me thinking, if homelessness is a loss of connection, what is belonging? What is my family's missing history? Where do I belong? I was still in America when my sister got cancer. I never got a chance to see her before she died. The pain of missing her is still with me. When I got a call that my dad was very ill, I raced home to Australia to be with him. But also, it gave me a chance to fulfill my ever-growing need for answers about my heritage, hidden in Grandpop's past. My mum married an Italian man, and they had us 5 kids. And we moved from the bush to the city in the 70s. Adelaide's been our home and base. In 2012, I was living at home, helping my parents while studying at uni, writing and filmmaking. Dad's health had gone downhill, and then Mum was diagnosed with cancer, 20 spots on her liver. They gave her 6 months to live, told her to pack up her things and prepare.
Is that a microphone?
It is actually a film camera.
Oh, is it?
This is a movie camera and a picture camera.
Wow.
If you want to see what's coming on, here, have a look at that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Very orangey, Ed. Is that supposed to be orangey?
Because I haven't used this camera before, so I'm not familiar with it. But in the meantime, you shoot anyway, just to see what you can do. Dad passed away in 2014. So, to me, time was ticking away, and I needed to do something if I was going to. Before Mum was gone, before the connections.
And that I left that in because that's a great example of all footage can be used. That footage that he shot of his mum when he was testing out the camera that he got from the Media Resource Centre, he had on the wrong setting, he shot it in the wrong codec. Everything about that was wrong. And people said, you can't use that footage. And he said, oh, it's great footage, it says so much. So it ended up in the film, and it's a really lovely, well, it's lovely in the film, but it's a lovely example of the tech. It doesn't have to be a pristine shot to work. It's part of the reason why the Super 8 works so well, because it just has such an evocative feel to it. I'm going to, I'll just check the time, very quickly show you a scene from a film, Sons and Mothers, which was the film I was working on with Chris Horton with all the storyboards. That was a film that had, it had an interesting problem in that the film was about a theatre group of disabled performers, and Chris wanted to make a film about the theatre group, and we would send a cut off, and the notes that all came back from Screen Australia were all about the director of the theatre group of the workshop. So the film is covering a workshop of over the course of a year, very fly in the wall, very immersive, very intimate film. And all the feedback kept coming back saying, look, the director's really great, but you're not really fleshing him out enough. And the director would get really, really angry going, it's not a film about the director, it's a film about the performers. And I said, look, you're looking at all the feedback the wrong way around. This feedback is telling us that we are presenting the wrong film. We are presenting a film about the director because that's what they're reading. Part of the problem was that when you have a workshop and you have a director in it who's very articulate and directing, the cameras will gravitate towards that. So the footage was very easy to find of the director, but not so easy to find of the rest of the troupe. So I said, we should take all the critiques we've had, all the advice of how to make them better, and flip it around and do the exact opposite of all this advice, because what you want is the opposite of what they think you're making, but we're presenting the wrong film. So this is how the film starts with quite a long section. It's a very immersive, slow film that you just get drawn into with a long section of each of the 7 performers, and then it goes to this scene And this was a cut before we revised the film.
Big circle. Let's see if we can keep eye on each other and see what we're doing. Make a big figure 8 kind of, yeah. And always coming up in the front. So if we go here, and we go like that, you look at it. There's like a loop here, and center up, center up. Good. Damien, show me. That's a beautiful circle. But what I want is up and down, and up and down, and look in center, and relax. And one hand, check, 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 check. All the way up, all together. Good, and the hand down, and the other one. Up high, and tippy toes high. Then you let it go, and down, down, and all the way down. Roll up slowly, and the last thing to come up is your head. Come on, big guy. Everybody have something to write with. So I'll give you a question, and I'll give you a bit of time to write your answer. So the first question is easy. In whatever way you can explain it, what is a mother?
Looking at our pin-up board, I said the very first scene we have in the film is all being directed, and we just got to cut the entire scene. And we went through every single scene in the film and restructured it. So instead of it being started, I won't show you a few more scenes, but every scene always started with the director leading the discussion, the workshop, whatever. And we just went, we cannot have that in the film at all. And we went through every single scene, and the scene had to be started by initiated by another performer and not the director. So this is the start of the film in its current form.
She can get angry sometimes, but not very often.
Mother is a lady who gave birth to me and brought me up and supports me.
What makes somebody a mom? Like if you have somebody from another planet, they don't even understand what that is. How do you explain them?
A mother is a helpful and supportive person. She can support you in things like sports, such as martial arts.
Dan, what you got?
The mother does I wear a band in the hair and wear a nightie in the morning.
So she wears a band in the hair?
Oh, yeah.
What is a band?
The wall things.
The what?
Oh, the rollers.
Rollers. She wears rollers. The mother wears rollers on the hair, and she wears a 90 in the morning. Okay. If I get you an old lady put in your house with rollers and a 90, is she your mom?
Oh, I don't think so.
Okay, so what makes your mom your mom?
Because she is.
Because she is. Can you write that? My mom is my mom because she just is.
Oh, yeah.
Great. Tell me about your mom now. Everything that you can tell me about your mom.
Miss Helen Marie Keane is her name, and she was born on the 11th of July 1944 in Norwood, SA. But when I was 4, she left my dad, and she never explained to me why. And so for a long time I was quite bitter. So this project is partly about coming from point of conception to birth and then new life, and just trying to cope with that rather than seeing the bitterness.
My mum's name is Jan Rowland. She works as a full-time nurse.
This chap who's on screen at the moment, one of the other problems the film had was everything was in that beautiful, slow, immersive timing, and you in a cinema you just get drawn into that, and it's just the most beautiful journey, and it got really boring because every scene was timed right, structured right, but you sort of knew in watching it a scene was going to be about 3.5 minutes long, so you start a scene and your brain would just go click and just turn off. And I said to Chris, we've made a very boring film. Everything in each scene is right, but the entire film is boring. So I said, we need to shake it up. We need to have something go wrong straight away. So then we moved a scene that was about scene 10 or 15. We moved that down to about scene 5. So one of the very first things that happened is a disaster, and then we moved another scene that was where things went wrong. So all of a sudden, it was only a really short scene, it was about 30 seconds long. So all of a sudden you had no expectation built into you of how long a scene was going to be, and that all of a sudden turned the film, which it was exactly the same film, but that tiny bit of structure it changed, made it engaging, and you connected with it because you almost couldn't afford to let go of it because you never knew where it was going to go when. How are we going? Any questions anyone wants to ask? How did we come across it? I thought it, and it's a skill you have to develop as a filmmaker to be able to watch something new and to just literally turn a switch and go, and I'll often do this, I'll often step away from my desk and go up, and I'll say out loud, I've never seen this before, and I'll watch it again. I have little mnemonics like that to make things fresh again. And so, you know, when we finally sat down and watched the whole thing, I just went, it's all the same. It's all, the rhythms are all the same. We've made some mistakes. And that's the sort of thing you can do quite late in the cut. And that often happens late in the cut. Right at the very end is a really exciting, vibrant time when you get to shake the whole thing up again. I've done it in other films where the director and I have both watched a film and gone, you know, it starts too slow, and he went flicking through the script and I went flicking through the scenes, and at exactly the same time we turned to each other and said, scene 5 starts the film. And it was a scene that had no explanation and you didn't know what was going on. I'll just quickly show you a few seconds from a young filmmaker who I don't quite know, perhaps because he came from a filmmaking family, but he had internalized how to make a film. These days we're often told to make films very, I'm trying to not click on it because the noise comes straight up. We're told to explain the film, and a lot of television tells us after the ad break, you're going to see this, you're going to see this, you're going to see this, because there's a feeling out there that you're going to lose your audience, so you tell them what the film's going to be about. I think the exact opposite. I think that's a guaranteed way to lose your audience, because they go, well, I know what that's about. I'll check out what's on the other stations. This filmmaker, at the age of 19, I think he was, somehow intuitively knew that, and the first film he made starts like this.
Madlara. Maikondu. Mantinda. Icha. Karu.
So we don't find out what he was doing getting those leaves off that tree until 3/4 way through the film. And so you're just drawn into a world, you don't know what's going on, you don't know why you're watching it. When it went on TV, the televisor insisted that we put up subtitles for those words, and we were radically against it because the whole film is about language, and to have to know what was being said defeats the purpose of him learning how to say it, and it took away from that sense of what's going on, what are we watching, what language is that? So he was a very mature filmmaker at a very young age. He wrote the music for that. He just sits down and noodles away in a sound studio and then put it all together and cut the whole thing. That's Buckskin. That's I think he's changed his name. He's Dylan Thomas. Dylan River is his name now. But he's a very promising young filmmaker. I have a lot of time for him. I think that's it from me. Thank you.